So this is lesson 20, I believe, in your textbook, and it's called Solving Algebraic Expressions with Absolute Value. Basically, this is a lesson where we're going to learn how to solve for x when an absolute value is concerned. So just a quick reminder real quick of what absolute value is. Absolute value is denoted with these straight lines on either side of your number. And remember, what absolute value is how far from the origin the number inside of that absolute value sign is from the origin, or the 0 point. Well, if I draw a number line and I start counting from 0, which is the origin, to 12, I go 12 spaces. So the absolute value of 12 is 12. If I started at the origin and I go from 0, or the origin, to negative 12, I have also moved 12 places. So the absolute value of 12 is 12. The absolute value of negative 12 is 12. So the reality is the absolute value of 12 and the absolute value of negative 12 both equal 12. Now that's going to come vital in a few minutes. So basically, positive 12 can result in a 12. Negative 12 can result in a 12. So that the fact that you can have a negative and a positive 12 to result in the same answer is going to become important in a few minutes. The second thing we need to remember is that when I have stuff inside of the absolute value, I can't really separate it. It has to stay together. So you're going to be given problems like this. The absolute value of x plus 3, this has to stay together because it's inside of those absolute value symbols. So it has to stay together. So the way that I'm going to work this, because the positive and the negative can result in the same answer, I am going to split this into two problems. And that is written horribly messy. But what I'm going to say is x plus 3 equals positive 8. X plus 3 equals negative 8. Because the positive and the negative can result in the same answer. So I need to have a positive and a negative. Okay? And now we're going to solve this for x. Most of these will be very simple to solve. I'm going to move this 3 over and subtract it. So x can equal 5. Move this 3 over and subtract it. And in this case, x equals negative 13. So both of these values are going to be my answer. We're going to do a couple of these, but what you have to remember is in order to solve these, I'm going to split into two problems, one with a positive answer, one with a negative answer, because the absolute value can be the positive or the negative. I just realized that 8 or negative 8 minus 3 is not what I wrote before, but I do not want to record the whole next slide, so we're going to just move on from that wrong answer I put on the board there. And let's look at how to solve this problem. All right. Our understanding is that an absolute value can be a negative or a positive. So we are going to have to split this into two problems with a negative and positive answer, but the first thing we have to do is solve for the absolute value. Oh, I spelled value wrong. V-A-L-U-E. So we need to end up with the absolute value equals a solid number. So I'm going to move my plus 5 over. When I move my plus 5 over, it is going to become, it's going to become a negative. Let me get my pen, there we go. 13 minus 5 is 8. Okay. Now that I've solved for my absolute value, which means absolute value is by itself, now I am going to break into two problems. One positive answer, one negative answer. Okay, so I'm going to split those up into one positive answer. When I do that, my absolute value sign goes away. The left side the things inside the absolute value do not change. Only the answer changes. We need one positive and we need one negative. When I do that, the absolute value signs change. And now step 3 is to just solve for x. Goodness gracious. Move my 3 over, and I'm at the exact same place I was before. 8 minus 3 is 5. Move this over. And that's negative 11, not whatever I put before. So I have 2 answers on this type of a problem. All right, let's do another one. But remember, solve for the absolute value, break it into a positive and a negative answer, and then just solve. Let's work through your class problems from this lesson. Remember, in your textbook, this is lesson 20, and on the top of that page on the right side, you have classwork. So let's work through a little bit of this. So what is my first step? My first step is to get my absolute value all by itself. So I'm going to put absolute value equals. I have to get it into my absolute value equal form. So I'm going to leave my absolute value of 2x plus 5. I'm going to move that 7 over. Then I'm going to have 18 minus 7, which is 9. Nope. My brain is mushy. I genuinely am sick. I have strep throat, and I think my brain is turned to mush. 18 minus 7 is 11. It even took me a few minutes to process that. Y'all saw me or heard me be quiet for a minute while I thought. All right, step 1, get my absolute value all by itself. My second step is to break it into a positive and a negative. When I do that, the absolute value sign goes away. Nothing inside that absolute value sign changes, only my answers. One becomes positive, one becomes negative. All right? Now I just solve for x. So I'm going to move this positive 5 over, and it's going to become 11 minus 5. Divided by 2, which is 3. Let's move this 5 over, and it's going to become, oh my gracious, hold on, 2x equals negative 11 minus 5. So 2x equals negative 16. Negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8. So when you write your answer, you're just going to put x equals 3, x equals negative 8, and that becomes your whole answer. All right, this is the last, I think, of your class, the last one on that class problem page. Yeah, I just looked. So what we're going to do, this one's going to be a little bit longer, just in the solving for x part, okay? We still need to get our absolute value by itself. So let's do that first. So get my absolute value by itself. I'm going to take my minus 4 and move it over here. And I'm going to have x plus 9. Now this is where this can get a little bit weird, because before I only had one answer, or one thing on the right side of my equal sign, and so I could just change the sign of that one thing. I still have to have one positive answer and one negative answer. So let me show you. Nothing in my absolute value sign changes, but I'm going to have one positive answer, and I'm going to have one negative answer. So when there are multiple things on the right side, I'm going to keep it all together in a set of parentheses. I'm going to have one positive and I'm going to have one negative. And in this case, I am going to have to distribute that sign in there. And remember when we talked about polynomials before, a positive outside changes nothing. A negative outside changes everything on the inside. So my left side isn't going to change. My right side, when there's a positive outside, isn't going to change. And I'm going to just go ahead and solve this first problem. Hopefully I have enough room here. I'm going to put my x over here and my 1 over here. Remember, when I switch those, the operation changes. My understood plus x becomes a minus. My plus 1 becomes a minus 1. 3x minus x is 2x. 9 minus 1 is 8. So x equals 8 divided by 2, which is 4. Now, if there's a negative outside, nothing's changing on my left. If I have a negative outside, everything inside that parenthesis changes signs. My understood plus x becomes a minus x. My plus 9 becomes a minus 9. And now I'm going to just solve it. Move my x over, move my 1 over. My minus x becomes a plus x when I move it. My plus 1 becomes a minus 1, and I have 4x equals negative 10. Divide that. And it's okay if you have, oh goodness, it's okay if you have a fraction for an answer. Remember, leave it as a fraction, but fully reduce it. So negative 10 over 4, they can both be divided by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So my answers are x equals negative 5 over 2 and x equals 4. Just remember, when I have more than one thing on one side of the equal sign, like this, it has to stay together with parentheses. Let's look at another one. All right, Lord help us all, I'm going to just make one up. So because we can end up with a fraction answer, it's going to be fine. So 3x minus 2 minus x equals 4. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is get my absolute value by itself. 4 plus x. Okay, there's solved for absolute value. Now I need to break this into a positive answer and into a negative answer. Remember, the absolute value symbols just go away. I'm going to have a positive, and then I'm going to have a negative. Oops, put those in parentheses because that negative sign is going to have to touch every piece inside of there. So put those in parentheses. Remember, we have to have a positive and we have to have a negative. So now a positive outside changes nothing in there. So that's going to just stay there. That's not at all the right words. That's going to not do anything. Everything's going to stay exactly the same. Now I can move my negative 2 over and I can move my x over. My plus x becomes a minus x when I move it. My minus 2 becomes a plus 2. This becomes 2x equals 6. 6 divided by 2. Looky there. All right, now let's do the negative side. This negative is going to have to be distributed into this parenthesis, and that changes the sign of everything. Don't spend a lot of time on that. Just remember, the sign of everything changes. So my understood plus 4 becomes a minus. My plus x becomes a minus. Now I'm going to move my 2 over, move my x over. Minus x becomes plus when I move it. Minus 2 becomes 2 when I move it. So 4x equals negative 2. Negative 2 divided by 4. So this case, they can be reduced to negative 1/2. So x equals 3 and x equals negative 1/2. Remember to split it into a positive and negative. The big mistake that is made most often here is not keeping this in parentheses. So make sure you keep that in those parentheses. All right. I despised when I had professors or teachers who would do the easy questions and then send me home with this ridiculously hard homework. And this, you won't actually have one this hard yet, but I looked through your book and saw some that get a little bit wonky, and so I wanted to go ahead and work one. Again, you won't have one this hard, I don't think, just yet, but I wanted to work one that looks terrifying so that when you see it, you have already seen a hard one done. Your rule of thumb when it comes to any mathematical problem is to simplify first. If I can simplify things before I start moving anything, I need to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify inside of this absolute value sign, and I'm going to go ahead and multiply that. So 5 times negative 1/6 is negative 5/6, and go ahead and leave your fraction as an improper fraction. It's going to make it easier. 7 times 1/6 is negative 1/6 is negative 7/6 minus 9. I'm going to go ahead and simplify that. 7/6 minus 9, and I pulled my calculator out because I don't want to think that far. Negative 7, fraction key 6, minus 9 is, and if you get an improper fraction, if you will hit the second and then that fraction key, it'll convert it back into an improper fraction. And you may not care, but I despise mixed numbers. Oops. So negative 7/6 minus 9 will give me negative 61/6. And y'all listen, use those calculators. For the rest of your life, you're going to have one, unless you go take an entrance exam or an SAT. And in that case, you'll have a simple one, but the reality is most of the time you'll have one. So when it gets to something weird like this, just pull that calculator out. All right, now I'm going to move my minus 8 over and do plus 8. Well, I have my calculator here. I'm going to just do this. And then I'm fixing to clean this screen up. 13/6. And keep working. I'm out of space. All right, here's where you were. I needed to give myself some more space. So now I'm going to split this into the positive and negative answer. Now pay attention because I already have a negative. So a positive and a negative. Ooh, I'm out of space. This plus a positive times a negative equals a negative. So we have negative 5/6 plus x equals negative 13/6. Move my minus 5/6 over, and it's going to become a plus. The negative 13/6 plus 5/6 gives me negative 8/6. That can be reduced. They can both be divided by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So there's that. Now on here, minus a negative becomes a plus. Move my minus 5/6 over, and it becomes plus 5/6. 13 plus 5, 18/6. Now 18/6 is a solid answer. That becomes 3. All right, you won't have any that hard on your homework, but there's one just so you can say I can say you've seen one that hard. Your homework is going to be another one of those tests. In this case, they're multiple choice questions, but every answer or every question is going to have 2 answers, because remember, you're going to break it into a positive and a negative, and you're going to solve it down, and you'll have 2 answers. So make sure on that multiple choice question, I believe there's only 6 of them, but the reality is that means you have 12 questions to solve, because you'll have 1 negative and 1 positive. So make sure you pick both answers on that problem. Now, your textbook does not number your problems. The way that they are numbered in the test is horizontal. So 1, then 2, then 3, then 4 is activity 2. Then activity 3 is 5 and 6. Okay? So this is going to be the layout for activity 2. This is the layout for activity 3. If you have any questions, let me know.